to those in the audience. I'm hoping there was no traffic, and that's why you're all here. We've been in meetings for a while. Madam Clerk, do you mind please calling the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mariko Sayak.
Here. And so as we do with every public meeting, we invite a young citizen from our community to come forward and help us open by leading the Pledge of Allegiance. And today I'm excited to invite Ben Macarishian to come forward. Come on up. Maybe you can figure that. So Ben is an 8th grader at Hillbrook, and he plays baseball for Los Gatos Little League, the juniors division, as well as the Titan travel baseball team. And he played the role of Sebastian in Hillbrook's Little Mermaid play. And recently began learning virtual reality programming, and he's developing a virtual reality dodgeball game with 2 other people. Yeah, that's pretty cool. He performs community service through Hillbrook as well as through the House of Hope. And one fun little tidbit is I knew Ben when he was still a little kindergartner, so I'm super excited that he's here today. So will you help lead us in tonight's pledge?
Okay. Okay. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this is for you on behalf of the town. So if you could all help me thank him for leading our Pledge of Allegiance tonight. So at this time, I'm going to ask Vice Mayor Rennie to join me down below. And what we'd like to do tonight is to honor those residents that served on our commissions, boards, and committees. So, we have several of them, and several of them are here in attendance that I'd like to recognize. So I'll be calling you forward one at a time. And at the end, I'd love for all of us to give them a big round of applause for all the work they've been doing. So with our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, Thomas Cook. Maria Risto. Our Citizens Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. This is the committee that helped put together the transportation occupancy tax that successfully passed in November. Lee Fago. Mark Robinson. And Jack Veneta. On our library board, Tom Atkinson. And he's not here today. And our planning commissioner, Charles Erickson, is not here as well. Okay. Well, so thank you very much for your many hours of service to the town. Thank you. Mr. Schultz, do you have a closed session report?
Good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, council met in closed session to discuss real property negotiations. No action was taken that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
And now we get to council town manager reports. In addition to serving during these public hearings, many of our council members also represent the town on various activities. Council members, do you have anything to report? Council member Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Since our last regular meeting, I attended a board meeting of the West Valley Solid Waste Management Authority, and we chose a new chairperson. We decided what to do with some fines we collected for liquidated damages. Those ended up going to a community food pantry. And we also discussed a report about what to do with the green waste collected by the Guadalupe landfill. That's about it.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Last week, I attended the General Assembly for ABAG in San Francisco as representative for Los Gatos. Primarily, what was discussed was the merger between ABAG and MTC, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We had general presentations on that and then broke out into smaller groups to give feedback from each of the communities regarding how they wanted to see that merger go forward and what they were looking for from the newly constituted agency. And essentially, the smaller communities such as Los Gatos emphasized that we wanted the communication to remain with ABAG, that our representatives stay in place, that when considering major transportation issues or development issues or, importantly, RENA numbers, that the small towns not be lost in what is now going to be a very large agency. And I think that message was received. Whether it will be followed through on or not is another question, but we'll try to make sure that happens.
Thank you, Council Member. Okay, since our last meeting, actually, Council Member Johnson and I had a policy committee on the 19th of January. The afternoon Rotary, I spoke with them and gave them an update on what has been happening within the town. Represented the town on West Valley mayors and managers. This is where all the cities in the West Valley get together, and we basically just decided what issues we would try and tackle for the year. Safe Routes to School, as well as the Los Gatos Union School District, had meetings that the town participated in. And the Santa Clara County Fire Department had their annual promotion and service recognition. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by thanking the council members and staff for the kind note in regards to my family emergency and for putting up with me from participating remotely last week. Because I was out, I did miss several things, but before that, on 123, I was at the Finance Committee with Mr. Leonardis, where we thoroughly reviewed the CAFR. On 125, I attended the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee, and then yesterday I attended the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee. The things on the agenda was presentations by all of the applicant organizations for either community services or affordable housing renovation and construction. This advisory body advises the county supervisors who give out CDBG, community development block grants from the federal government. So we advise how to give those out to the applicants. Thank you.
So, Member Spector.
Thank you. Since the last meeting, I attended the General Plan Committee meeting. At that meeting, we elected Melanie Hansen as chair and Kendra Birch as vice chair. We were going to consider a general plan amendment to the property that's located at the end of the terminus of Pine and Alberto, but we didn't have enough people. We didn't have a quorum, so we didn't move forward, and we will be doing that tomorrow. I attended the Santa Clara Valley Water District Commission meeting. That was interesting because the night before, the water district had decided that the water would have, in the community, would have goals but not mandates. And as a result of that, the commission, mainly led by the West Valley and specifically Montesereno, suggested that the San Jose Water Company should no longer have mandates and surcharges. Mr. John Tang from the San Jose Water Company was there, and he attempted to speak to that issue. But having said that, it was the next day that I saw that the San Jose Water Company asked to have the surcharges removed, and since that time they have indeed been removed. And lastly, along with the mayor, I was in attendance at the Los Gatos Union School District Education Summit, where generally the topic was what are the priorities of the school district given an anticipated parcel tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Manager Pravetti, do you have a report for us today?
Thank you. We'd like to invite everyone to our 5th anniversary library celebration, which is happening on Saturday, February 11th from 1 to 4 at the library. Second, we are starting our adult recruitments for the vacancies on the Building Board of Appeals and General Plan Committee. The applications are due March 10th, and we will soon be starting up for our youth recruitment, and applications for the youth opportunities will be due April 28th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we have our consent agenda. There are 8 items on our consent agenda. I do not have any cards to pull any of the items, so I look quickly to the council and to the audience. If anyone would like to pull this for a full public hearing, you may do so. Not seeing anything, I look for a motion. Councilmember Jensen?
Move approval of the consent calendar consisting of items 1 through 8.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Leonardis. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. And we're now at verbal communications. This is your opportunity to speak to an item that's not on the agenda. I have one card from Miss Angelia Dorner.
Hello, this is Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I just wanted to go through this schedule, which I had started on last week and ran out of time because I got a little bit off the charts there at the beginning. But these are basically several development projects. They're all office buildings. The McCarthy project is 20,000 square feet. The one at 401, 409 Alberto originally was 92. I don't know what the revised plan is, but it's going to be coming forward to the Planning Commission in March. And then there's the Alberto project that Ms. Spector referred to, and then Valley Oaks, which is on the corner of Shelburne and Winchester. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm going to give you a few numbers here that just tend to not make very much sense from the traffic impact analyses. Based on the square footage at 235 square feet, that determines how many parking spaces you're required. So you can see at McCarthy, which is 20,000, they have 85 seats, or 85 spaces, but they are getting credit from the parking district, and that's about the same amount that is expected at the end of Alberto. Winchester is 128 parking spaces, and the original Alberto was 254. Now, at the last Planning Commission meeting, the people at Winchester, the architects, said that what they use as a guide is 100 square feet per person. And so there was a little bit of an argument between the developer and the architect on, oh, no, that gives it too big of a number. And so anyway, I'm showing you what the architect said at 100 and then 150 to show how many people are supposed to be occupying that building. As you can see, there just does not seem to be much of a relationship between these numbers. And more importantly, with the traffic impact analysis, the McCarthy, although they have 85 spaces, will have 90 net trips in, 56 in, 36 out in the AM peak hours. PM peak will be 48, 15 in, and 33 out. The Winchester, even though they have 128 spaces, will have 33 in and 8 out in the AM peak hours. And in the PM peak hours, they will have 4 in and 46 out. The original Alberto, just to keep things in context, of the 254, there was supposed to be a net 109 trips in the AM peak hours, and in the PM hours, peak hours would be 102 net trips. Now, I'm sorry, but this just does not make any sense. I can follow the methodology, I can track the numbers, but these things just do not make sense. And there's a lot of confusion with the Planning Commission, a lot of confusion with the residents, and I'm hoping that you'll consider bringing up some kind of a study session or something regarding traffic impact analysis and how maybe we can find something that makes a little bit more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Next, Natalie Ladd.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and staff. I just wanted to remind everybody that the Transportation and Parking Commission meeting is happening this Thursday at 6 p.m. in the Council's chamber. If you're interested in hearing about the VTA and the proposed VTA change that they want to make, it pretty much in a nutshell is they're proposing to take away the bus out of the whole downtown area. It would just cut through Highway 9 and avoid the high school and the downtown area. So this is a great opportunity for you to come or anybody in the community to give input because they are accepting inputs. It's not final, so we could still give input and try to keep that busing system in our community. That's it.
Thank you. And Ms. Ladd, could you remind everyone the day and time?
It's this Thursday, February 9th at 6 p.m. here in the council chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Trout?
3 minutes. Okay, great. All right. I thought I'd come down here to talk to you about possibly putting InfoWars bumper stickers on the cop cars. And there's so much fake news now. We understand that ABC, NBC, CBS, and others are just lying to us. And Alex Jones is a very good talk show host. He's been around for a long time. He's an old guy. He's about 43 years old now, and you can go back 20-something years and listen to him. And he was very instrumental in regards to interviewing the police officers in 95 where the federal building blew up and Bill Clinton accused Rush Limbaugh on talk radio of blowing up the federal building. Rush should have went down there. It was Alex Jones that did, and he interviewed officers Terrence Yakey, who was going to join the FBI, Officer Don Browning, who was head of the K-9 unit, Officer Craig Roberts, who's also works for the media, and other policemen who testified that their lives were threatened by the FBI. Did you hear that? That's what these cops testified if they did not stop the investigation. All right? And it's very important. The reason why I think it's very important that we do this is because, you know, if we don't know what's actually going on, some have called CNN the Clinton News Network, you know, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. There's big money powers. And it's so important for us as citizens and to protect the lives of the cops themselves to get accurate, truthful information, you know, to the community. It really is. And I have, you know, Jesus said with God all things are possible. And I have this vision. I saw a cop car in San Francisco that had an InfoWars bumper sticker. And before I could go up to him and thank him, you know, he drove off. But I have this vision, you know, I want to put them on the police vehicles here and in San Jose and throughout California and the United States, on the emergency personnel, on the firemen. I was talking to the firemen today, and you know, to get this out. I remember the firemen had for a while the bumper sticker that said, "We'll never forget," on 9/11. Remember that? And I remember when Hillary shot herself in both feet. I don't know. The woman is insane, I guess. When she said, you know, Alex Jones actually believes that Oklahoma City and 9/11 were inside jobs. Well, yeah. Okay, and how can I pack into 30 seconds 3 hours? He is live from 9 to noon on KOMY 1340. I actually learned about the guy on Rush Limbaugh's broadcast, and I would listen to Rush every day, and he had a commercial and a video that he produced, and now it's 90%, you know, Alex Jones, 10% Rush, but he's 10 times better than whoever's in second place.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. And this is being televised through KCAT, so your message is being shared. Okay. Any other verbal communications? Okay. We are now moving to other business. Agenda item number 9, which is an amendment to the agreement for employment of our town attorney. And Ms. Velasco?
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. A recommendation has been received to amend the employment agreement between the town and the town attorney. Senate Bill 1436 went into effect on January 1st of this year, and it requires an oral summary of a recommendation to modify the salary or benefits of any person employed under an employment agreement. The terms of the amendment include a 2.5% wage increase, consistent with increases recently approved for town management salaries, a lump sum performance bonus of $2,500, and the transfer of a $350 monthly car allowance to base salary. This concludes the oral summary, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Velasco. Any questions? Seeing no questions, any comments and or a motion? Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you for that reminder. I am opening public comments. Are there any? I have no cards for this item. Okay, seeing none, I will close the testimony and look to Councilmember Jensen.
I'll move approval of the amendment to the employment agreement for Mr. Schultz, attachment 1 to our staff report between Los Gatos and its town attorney, consistent with, I guess I can't say that, consistent with the previous council action.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Velasco. Okay, item number 10, upgrade of the town's electricity accounts to Silicon Valley Clean Energy's Green Prime service. Mr. Morley.
Good evening, Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. A quick oral report for you. In February of 2016, the council voted to join Silicon Valley Community Choice Energy, which was set up to provide an alternative source of electricity to residents and businesses, alternative to PG&E. Since then, the progress has continued, and Vice Mayor, Rennie, was appointed as the town's representative, and is probably at this point the subject matter expert for the town on this particular item. The goal for the alternative energy is to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and there are several programs that are brought forward to do that at the same cost or at a higher level cost with a higher level program. The first option, obviously, is to remain with PG&E. This is an opt-out plan, so that in order to remain with PG&E, the town would need to opt out of the Silicon Valley Community Choice Energy Program. This is still an option for the town on our municipal accounts if we choose to go that direction, in which case there would be no fiscal impact, as our accounts would continue as they are today. A second option, which is the default option for SVCE, is the Green Start program. That program uses hydro, a combination of hydropower and renewable power to provide electricity. This is a difference from the electricity provided from PG&E, which also uses natural gas and coal power. And then the third option is a step above, which is the Green Prime option. That uses all renewable. It takes out the hydro power out of the equation. Both the Green Smart and the Green Prime, the two options from Silicon Valley Clean Choice Energy, achieve the same greenhouse gas reduction targets. The Green Smart, the default program, would result in a couple of $1,000s a year in savings estimated on our utility bills. While the Green Prime program, the step above, would require the town to pay an additional approximately $18,000 a year in utility or electric bills. The staff recommendation for this program aligns with the foremost example of leadership in conservation, and that's what we've provided for you. 7 of the 12 other cities that are participating in the program have elected the Green Prime. So our staff recommendation is for the town to assign our municipal accounts the Green Prime, the upgraded model. And we're looking for council direction on either that option or one of the other options that I've spoken to. With that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. I just had a question. Though the Green Prime costs more initially, do we anticipate that eventually it could result in savings?
So I don't think that there's an intent to create savings there. I think the intent is to align align the power with the source of where the energy is coming from. It's a little bit difficult, I think, to project where clean power will go in terms of its ongoing long-term costs. So there may be an opportunity as more and more renewable energy sources are developed that the costs will come down, but there's been no projections that I've received on that.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll maybe add to Mr. Morley since I'm the subject matter expert, I guess. First of all, I'd say that you did a very good job of writing a staff report that, carefully explained, all the relevant points, I think, in there. In terms of the finances, the way we've structured it is for the first 2 years, we've decided we're going to start off 1% below PG&E. If they raise their rates in the second year, we're not going to raise our rates. We picked 1% below and 100% carbon-free as the default because, first of all, we want to be, come out 100% carbon-free, but we also want to quickly build a financial reserve because things get cheaper for you when you have to borrow money. You have to buy power, and then later you get paid by your users. So you've got a rolling, loan accounts and so forth. We've borrowed $2 million from the cities to start this up. We've borrowed another, I'm forgetting whether it's $2 or $5 million to bridge us until we've made money from our power sales. So our financial goal for those first 2 years is to pay all that back and build a big reserve. If things stayed the same, and I will bring up a term called PCIA, which is the wild card in it that PG&E talks and the other IOUs, we call them investor-owned utilities, probably throwing away too many acronyms now, but that they lobby when we take away their customers, they now have stranded assets that they bought at high prices. So they argue, well, you've got to pay us some because now we have this asset that we've bought, power asset that they've bought. That every year gets adjusted. If they go as forecasted and we keep our rates 1% below PG&E, we'd have in 5 years, we will make $140 million. So if everything went as forecasted, we would definitely lower our rates to be much below PG&E, or I shouldn't say definitely, or we could have options to then spend our money on other programs to encourage solar on homes or to encourage energy retrofits or however we want to spend it. But most likely we would be lowering it. But again, there's lots of variables in it. So kind of trying to answer your question is we hope we will be even cheaper with the Green Prime, but we can't completely foresee the future.
Any questions? Okay. There's an opportunity for the public to comment on this if you desire. And I see Ms. Angelia Dorner, if you could come on up and just hand your card.
Hello, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. Just really quick, the resident meeting about this opportunity was done way before the JPA was actually formalized. And I know since then, Vice Mayor Rennie, if you would consider having a public meeting to discuss where we are now. I know that I saw a slide or two when you were getting ready to go do Campbell, I believe, and there was even examples of what your PG&E bill is going to look like, et cetera. None of that information has been shared with the public, and if this is going to be starting up soon or if it's already started, people need to know what their options are, opt-in, opt-out, etc. And if you could also maybe clarify the $145 million that you think, if forecasted correctly, the $145 million that you make is what we pay, right? That's my question to Mr. Rennie as our representative on the Energy Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any other comments? Seeing none, I'll close public testimony, and then Councilmember Jensen has a question. No, a comment or
a motion.
A motion.
My motion is that we upgrade the town, and again, this is the town, electricity accounts to Silicon Valley Clean Energy's Green Prime service per the staff report and the information we've received tonight.
Okay. I'll second the motion, and for the reasons stated in the staff report, I'm not looking at it as the financials, but more of the intrinsic value of being a leader in providing 100% renewable and 100% carbon-free. Any other comments? Vice Mayor?
I'm sorry.
You want to go first? I'll go first.
No, you go first.
So I did want to respond a little bit to Ms. Dorner's comment. So I have been giving presentations around town. I've given it at both the Rotaries, the Lions Club, and the Kiwanis Clubs. It's about a 20-minute presentation. I'm happy to do it for town organized or anybody else that wants to do it. So I'm plenty happy to share. I've been trying to find more places to share, so I leave that offer open to anybody that wants to contact me, including the town. And then in terms of the motion, I want people to understand the difference. So the Green Start is 100% carbon-free. So if your concern is just fighting global warming, then the Green Start is good enough. As you heard, 7 of 12, I think, of the other cities have gone for the full Green Prime, and the real difference is hydro, which has an environmental aspect to it. If you buy too much hydro, you encourage people to build dams, which does an environmental damage. So by voting for Green Prime, we are going sort of beyond just the global warming, just so it's clear.
Councilmember Spector, did you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. The environmental issues have been something I've been working on for many years, if not decades, and so it is a significant issue to me. However, also of significance to me, as we learned from our last meeting, is the town's financial resources. And so for me, I'm not going to support the motion because we could have an environmental position in this issue with a potential savings of $2,600 per year, as opposed to an additional $18,500 per year. So based on the finances and the fact that the Green Start is an environmental process, I will not be supporting the motion.
Any other comments? Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc, and I also echo the comments of Councilmember Spector. I look at the monetary savings. Yes, it's great if we can save the world and save money at the same time, but I prefer to save money before I save the world. So I would be inclined to go with the Green Start program.
Any other comments? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess that leaves me as the swing vote, which I didn't really want to be because I'm actually a little bit on the fence for this. I've been sort of surprised so many other cities have signing up for it. I'm actually the vice chair for this, so I feel like I should be promoting us moving to Green Prime. But if I look at the dollar amount, it's $20,000 delta, which is 4% of our electricity budget. So it's not a big number. So although I'm a little bit on the fence, I tend towards probably supporting this motion.
Councilmember Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. In our last meeting, we discussed what to do with the financial extras that we have in our current fiscal year. And we discussed contributing money to the arts and some other things. And to me, $20,000 is kind of significant. We awarded them $25,000. We could be giving them $45,000. But there are a lot of other competing expenses in town. Although it seems like an insignificant amount of money, I always say you write the check. And if somebody has to actually write that check, they wouldn't. So for me, I would be inclined to go with the Green Start program and save more money.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so it passes 3-2 with Councilmember Spector and Leonardis opposing. And we now move to agenda item 11, which is our Measure B, Los Gatos priorities. So, and Mr. Morley, if you can walk us through that one.
Thank you very much. For this one, I did do a PowerPoint. And this information is also in your packet, but I wanted to run through it really briefly up on the screen. Outlined on the screen are the goals for the program. The program has a number of priorities. I've separated them into programs that are of interest to the town and those that are not of or of low interest to the town, meaning that the impact, if there is an impact, is indirect. Those on the top are the more direct impacts for us. There are a number of projects within them, and I'll go through each category specifically. The ultimate goal of the meeting is for us to come out with a prioritized list at the end, and we'll discuss that list when I get there. And then additionally to authorize funding for staffing so that we can move forward with getting in front of these projects. What we're finding is that there's a significant amount of activity now in terms of jurisdictions putting themselves in positions for funding. The biggie is projects that are shovel ready, are ready to be built, are going to receive funding on the first round of funding. The VTA will be looking at the funding opportunities in 2-year cycles, with their first cycle set this year in their fiscal budget, and then with a 10-year look ahead. So the opportunity is now if the town wants to have a significant jump on the program. The first program is Local Streets and Roads. There is about $1.2 billion. It's a formulaic distribution, so this will come to the town at approximately $650,000 a year. It does require a maintenance of effort. Maintenance of effort means that we need to continue to expend our general fund contributions at the same level into the future. So the idea there is to avoid shifting general fund dollars and offsetting general fund dollars with dollars from the measure. For those projects with a PCI greater than 7, for those towns or cities with a PCI greater than 70, there is an opportunity for more flexibility with the funds. Currently, our PCI is 3 or 4 points below that and trending downward. So we have some work to do in order to get there. Certainly, $650 a year will help us to boost that a little bit. And as we talked about in a priority setting session, there's additional need. And as we move towards 70 over the course of Measure B, and it is a 30-year measure, there may be opportunities to have some more flexibility with these dollars. The guidance on the flexibility is for congestion management, so it's very relevant to the town. All of the projects within this program require a complete streets element. For this program, that likely means striping for bike lanes or pedestrian crossings and those types of elements, all within the general scope of the project, not necessarily a full complete street as it may be defined in its extreme. And there is a 10% local match requirement, so the program is looking for the town to contribute as well. Currently, we do that with our other allocations. On all of these, there has been some discussion with VTA on what that 10% match looks like. Some of the language has come back as 10% local match. Some of it has come back as 10% non-VTA dollars, and we've been pushing for the local match language. It's much more appropriate for us. The non-VTA dollars takes out some of the other grant opportunities that we might use for matches. So that's a continued theme through all of these programs. I also on the bottom identified the likelihood of funding for each of the programs. In this particular program, the likelihood of funding is high, and that is because it's formulaic. So these dollars we can count on coming our direction. There is some discussion on whether it's front-loaded, so whether the dollars more than $650 comes in the early phases and a little bit less over time. And if you remember back to our pavement maintenance conversations, there's some advantage to doing pavement maintenance at the front end to take care of that degradation that happens as streets start to fail. The second program is a bicycle and pedestrian program. And the available funding, as you see, is $250 million. The biggest project we have identified here is the Highway 9 connector to the Los Gatos Creek Trail. Originally, when this program was being developed with the VTA, there was some conversation about a group project that would cover some of the smaller elements, some of the elements that you're seeing coming forward now through our Bike and Ped Master Plan and our Safe Routes study. But that language didn't make it as clearly into the measure as I would have liked. I did have a conversation with VTA about what are the opportunities of other projects being funded, and there may be some. There's some categories that identify a complete streets program, a countywide bike plan, things like that we may be able to squeak some additional projects into. The program elements on this one include projects that connect to schools and fill gaps, so we have some good competitive projects if we're able to expand beyond that Highway 9 connector. again, a 10% match, and because of the Highway 9 project, we're likely to get some funding if we can move the design concept on that project a little bit further. And there is, again, a potential later for some of the smaller projects. This is an oversubscribed program, so there's a lot of interest in the Bike and Ped program, so it will be highly competitive in the future. There'll be some spread of these funds, so it's not $250 at year one out of the gate. That'll be over the course of 30 years. But it is likely to be highly competitive throughout. There's lots of movement in this area. The third program is the State Route 85 corridor. There's $350 million here. This one still has some definition to come as a current alternative study takes place. Right now, the leaning is towards creating a transit lane on Highway 85 from 101 in the south end of Highway 85 to 101 in the north end. So a full route transit line. In the full vision of what that looks like, it would have boarding and disembarking in the center median, so the buses would never leave the freeway. The idea behind that is that it increases the efficiency of the buses, and it would have a park and ride. If you think about the light rail near Cottle, that's an example of a station that works in that kind of a format. There is a 10% match here. The likelihood of funding at this point is low to moderate because of the lack of definition on the project. I will mention that there is a noise abatement study that VTA did conclude for the corridor. There were no segments of Highway 85 in Los Gatos that exceeded the tolerance levels for noise, so there are no projects currently scheduled through the noise abatement program for the town. That is also the subject of one of the lawsuits that the town has in conjunction with other cities towards the environmental clearance with VTA. I would point out if there were to be a stop in Los Gatos for a transit center along Highway 85, there is some difficulty in the short term if the buses do need to come on and exit the freeways at Winchester, because it is only a partial interchange. So that provides some challenges. I think long term there may be a good argument for a stop there, but short term, if the buses do need to enter and exit the freeway, it becomes a bit challenging. The highway interchanges is the most interesting, and I provided in your report some language that was unique to Los Gatos. Thanks to Councilmember Spector for working towards getting that language included. It certainly provides a carve-out language that addresses a wide variety of Los Gatos projects and programs. The available funding is $750 million. There is a consideration for project readiness and a local contribution, and in this case, a 20% local match are being considered. This again is an oversubscribed program, so it's going to be highly competitive as projects move forward. The projects will be high-cost projects as well, so this would be projects like our Highway 9, Highway 17 interchange, which would fall in this category, as well as pretty much all of our other interests for congestion management within the town. The language is broad. Things like our traffic model would fit, the school busing model would fit in here. Local shuttle or senior shuttle services might fit into this particular category. Our intelligent transportation system or traffic signal upgrade would fit into this category. So it is a very broad category. Again, because it's oversubscribed, we'll want to prioritize projects and figure out how we take this one on. Transit operations is the last one that we have a potential for achieving some funding in. Transit operations is something you would normally think of as VTA funding. However, there is an opportunity for our busing models to get some dollars here. Also out of the next network offset in terms of funding that might come out of a decrease in bus service to a local community. VTA might backfill that through this particular area. There are 4 qualifying criteria, the most important of which is the first and last mile. The most important of which for us, for the town of Los Gatos, is the first and last mile connections. But there are small things like improving bus stop amenities and enhancing the frequent core network, which is sort of the frequency of bus services, and expanding mobility opportunities for the most vulnerable, which for us might be seniors. So there are some opportunities here. again, the devil's in the details, and the funding likelihood of funding here is moderate. So staff has provided a draft list of priorities. These are in priority order from staff's perspective. We wanted to have some discussion on this. I'll skip to the next slide and come back to that one in a second. So the next steps and sort of what we're looking for out of this meeting is to receive the report that you've had before you, to prioritize the projects, and then to have the conversation around authorizing advanced funding out of the 15-16 last year's fund balance in order to bring staffing on to begin implementation of our project readiness. So that's where we're at. I'll slide back to the slide before, because I think it's the one that's going to drive most of the conversation. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Morley. I'm going to go to Vice Mayor, and then Councilmember Spector, and then Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me start with 3 questions. First of all, you mentioned traffics during the interchanges. Don't you mean during transit operations?
It's identified and could fall into both of those categories, and that brings up a good point. There are projects that could fall into multiple categories, and so there's multiple opportunities for funding, and that funding may come from one or more of the categories.
And so then, second question. I'm trying to understand the 10% match on the 85 quarter. So we've got $350 million, $85 million supposed to be for noise abatement. If we don't cough up 10%, then they're going to pave in Saratoga and stop in Los Gatos and then pave when they get to San Jose again?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenging questions that we're struggling with at VTA right now is what does that match look like, and how appropriate is it for projects, for instance, on the freeways that cover multiple jurisdictions, and if one jurisdiction doesn't bring forward their match, what does that do to the overall project? So I think ultimately logic will win out a little bit on this one, and the match will not be applied to the projects that cover multiple jurisdictions. I anticipate there'll need to be VTA board action to approve those projects, but I don't see that as being a hurdle. If you look at a project like the Highway 9, Highway 17 interchange, there may be a different argument there where VTA would be looking for a local match on that particular item. Now, I would say that a local match doesn't necessarily mean local dollars, so it could be a federal grant or a state grant that provides that match. So it doesn't necessarily have to be our general fund dollars that meet that need. And of course, we also have our traffic impact fees that could meet some need for a limited amount of time.
So you answered most of my third question, which was on the interchange, which I understand is supposed to be $15 million, so 20% becomes $3 million. So I was going to ask, where is that going to come from? So you've kind of answered that, I guess. And am I right? It is $3 million that we'd have to get from somewhere?
We haven't done a whole lot of work on that project. I think, as I recall, that project was in at $10 million. It could be $15 million, but nonetheless, it's $1 million amongst friends. It would be a chunk of change that the town would need to provide a solution for. I think they're looking for the town to drive that solution. It might be, in that particular case, as simple as having a conversation with Caltrans to get Caltrans to come to the table. If Caltrans had capital improvement dollars that they could bring forward, then that would be a solution. Again, that's another project that could have some funds from some of the other funding categories. Bike and Ped, it will have a significant impact there, so there could be some crossover on categories on how that funding works. All yet to be determined, but certainly a question that we're wrestling with.
Thank you.
Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 3 questions. First of all, I want to just confirm staff is suggesting a full-time position for 3 years at about $70,000 per year for a total of $210,000?
No, the position is $70,000 for the balance of this year and $210,000 a year in subsequent years.
All right, thank you. And is that for ultimate, even though it's 2 years and then a half a year or whatever, it's a full-time position?
That's correct.
Is it your, I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but is it your understanding or impression that we would need someone working 40 hours a week for 2.5 years in order to advocate and have us obtain our Measure B priorities?
Yeah, the recommendation is meant to put us in the best position possible to bring dollars our direction. So that's my estimate of what the transportation needs are, the specialized transportation needs are for Los Gatos. There's a significant amount of crossover on some of our other priorities as well. So it's focused on obtaining funding for Measure B. You can see where some of the projects that are of interest to the town, for instance, cut through traffic, the Safe Routes to Schools work, the Bike and Ped Master Plan, all would fall into potentially funding in that program. And the development or advancing of projects within those, the work that we've already done would be a key responsibility of this position. So certainly plenty of work to advance projects. There's, as you can see, a list there that need a lot of work in order to get them over the goal line.
Okay, and then on this list here on the wall, there's Park and Ride on 85. I think that's what it says. Isn't that the one near Netflix that, if I recall correctly, was a component of an earlier VTA measure that, rather than be part of Measure B, would be incumbent upon VTA to determine to move it forward under, I think it was A?
So yeah, under Measure A, VTA allocated funding for environmental studies and for property acquisition, which is certainly a big first step. It doesn't allow for any of the construction costs associated with a park and ride or any infrastructure if that was to be developed further into a bus stop in the long term or a light rail station. So depending on what council sees as the value to that particular project, that's why we've included it there.
So if VTA would be, if VTA under Measure A would determine whether or not it becomes a park and ride station, we would still need monies to fix it up.
Correct.
Okay. And
if I could, I want to take an opportunity to talk about the status of that particular project. I did have a conversation with VTA about where they're at in terms of property acquisition. The Vasona line comes through Campbell, would, in its best scenario, have a stop in Campbell and an end point at Highway 85 in Los Gatos. VTA was attempting to purchase Summerwinds Nursery and was not successful in that effort, so that was one of their stops in Campbell. That's thrown a bit of a wrench into their project, and since that time they've made little or no additional efforts towards advancing the project. That's a little worrisome to me in terms of what their priorities are in terms of that project, and I would suspect that given the perspectives on light rail currently at VTA, that it might not be at the top of the VTA list.
all right, and thank you. One last question. You have here the bus feasibility study with regard to busing. Up here you just say school busing, but in your exhibit you say school busing feasibility study.
Yes.
Let's assume for the sake of this question that school busing is a significant issue to me, but are we really looking at prioritizing moving forward with advocating for school busing, or are we looking at a feasibility study? And if it's a feasibility study, how long is that going to take before we can advocate for school busing, or is it a chicken and the egg thing?
The feasibility study, in my mind, is instrumental to obtaining future funding through Measure B. So we need to be able to prove the concept before the Measure B funding will start to come to the town. So that's why we've put it in as a feasibility study as the initial steps to say, yes, this is going to work. It would involve, in my mind, a significant amount of outreach to the parents of children in the school, looking at the forecast enrollment at the various schools and what the potential ridership is, figuring out if it really makes sense for the town to do that, and if there's going to be support in the community for it. Once we get to a feasibility study and making the assumption that the result is positive, I think that's the point where we would be asking for money for busing based on the feasibility study. So looking at it from a time frame perspective, I think that's where we're headed. Again, goes to why I thought it was important to front load some of this work and get it going now, so that as soon as possible we can be there saying we have a shovel-ready project, a project that has a feasibility study behind it that demonstrates its viability, and we'd like the rest of Measure B to be funding that program. The Measure B program, I think, would, if we work with VTA closely, would be able to fund the feasibility study as well. So I think there's room for that as well.
And how long do you think a feasibility study would take?
Yeah, so I see a feasibility study taking in the 6-month time frame from, and maybe a few months longer than that. After that, we're into making the case with VTA for the long-term funding for it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen?
2 questions, I think. I'm assuming that what we're seeing on the screen right now is an abbreviated version of Attachment 2 in our staff report.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess I am a little confused about the park and ride that's listed at number 12. I know that there were discussions that I participated quite a bit in discussions of using the Vasona Light Rail property, which is owned by the Santa Clara Valley Water District, as a corporate bus station, if you will, and park and ride, which is different than what I think that you are explaining. So my question is, what happened to the notion that the Measure B could potentially result in a purchase of that property and Los Gatos' use of that land for a corporate bus yard? Park and ride, Uber, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's something that we'd like to continue to push for. Ultimately, from VTA's perspective, they were looking at that location as a station for their light rail.
That isn't going to happen.
That is a tough one to get completed, yes. I would agree with you there. There is no reason for us not to continue to pursue it in terms of priorities. That's where it landed on my list. And that's why we're here. We wanted to talk about what this list looks like and the potential for moving things up or down that list.
Okay, so what you just said caused me to be confused again.
Mm-hmm.
Is the notion of using Vasona Station for a park and ride for buses, etc., your number 12? Because what I was hearing you say was something that I understood to be totally different.
It is my number 12.
It is your number 12. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. And then Mr. Director Morley, so I believe at the last meeting we authorized, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we authorized hiring a senior level engineer to help get the process started. And so if I want to make sure I understand the process, based on what we declare as our priorities, that person will then basically start work on this. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we identified it as a priority for the next budget cycle. So we'll bring that back to you as we develop our budget for next fiscal year.
Okay.
So we would, based on those priorities, have the funding on July 1st for that position and begin the recruitment at that point.
Okay. So following your thread of we want to be shovel ready, if we would like some things to start immediately, do we have to authorize funding for that tonight?
So that's the option that we've given you, yes, is to advance that to now with an additional funding of approximately $70,000 to begin the recruitment and bring that position on earlier so we can get more shovel ready and in front of the projects.
Okay, so using the feasibility study as an example, obviously you will need someone on staff to manage it, but that I assume would be hiring a consultant to do that for us. So.
That would be a consultant job, yes.
That we can begin immediately if it's deemed a priority.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. In looking at your list, you reminded me of something. That's the Highway 17 Express bus. When you and I had our meetings last summer that included the Caltrans man, he gave us numbers of the number of people who use the buses that currently exist. And my recollection are those numbers aren't very high and that the buses are not full. So if you could please fill in the gaps in my memory.
I think your memory is very good. I don't recall the numbers specifically, but I do recall that same conversation where there were challenges to the service in terms of the ridership. Which is one of the reasons why it's number 11 on my list. It's still potentially something where, as congestion on Highway 17 continues to increase, there may be some demand there. The other reason that it's number 11 on my list is because I don't know that it impacts Los Gatos as much as some of the other projects. So maybe a little bit on cut-through traffic on the way home on the southbound commute, but it doesn't help our weekend commute unless they start a weekend bus service, which is a potential. And it skips, there is no stop in Los Gatos, so it skips Los Gatos and doesn't provide a service to Los Gatos commuters.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, at this time I'll open public testimony. I have 2 cards, first being from Angelia Dorner.
Oh, okay. I was hoping they'd have that. Okay, that's fine. Hello, Angelia Dorner, still from the Almond Grove, and very proud of it. Back in October of 16, we received a QES report from PPW regarding our PCIs and street maintenance. I intended to get into that and analyze it right away because I had a lot of questions, but I just set it aside. But now that we're focusing on road maintenance, especially with the condition that we maintain current levels of effort in order to get funding through B, that we be very careful about how much we start funding each year until we start getting that money in. If you recall, in 2015, we budgeted $900,000, which was rejected. The bid was rejected. That $900,000 was added to 1.3 in 16 for a total of 2.2, and there is $653 million of that still left in the fund balance, which was not referred to last Monday. The section 6 in the QES report refers to the current level of funding not making it. However, if you really look at the details in that, the only streets that get any kind of work are in the high 80s to 90s. I'd like to highlight an excerpt from the February 1st, 16 staff report. StreetSaver provides a high-level view of street conditions based on PCI. We use that as a starting point and review those streets in the field to confirm their condition. Staff identifies solutions that can keep the street out of reconstruction, and the use and success of rubber cape seal is a way to extend the life of the streets. And it also demonstrates the value in having staff visit and professionally evaluate each street. Excerpts from the QES report say that maintenance and rehab data was updated, as well as a decision tree for treatments and costs so that they match current prices. And in addition to the cyclical PCI inspections, unit costs should be updated annually to make sure that we're not understating anything. But the real key out of the QES report that caused me some alarm is on the last page. It says, this report was generated by the software and has not been reviewed for constructability efficiencies. So basically, this is just something that was spit out from StreetSaver. And to remind you that it uses categories, it uses categories of PCIs from very low to, I need to show you this room. Okay. So the top schedule is out of QES, which shows that our current network PCI is 67. I actually took out the weighted average of the PCI streets, which was a weighted average of 25. Just by getting rid of those streets, it increases it to 68. If you actually add it back in at 100 PCI for each of those streets, we actually get up to a weighted average of 71. And so I've tied out those numbers, and I have some more information for you. If
any questions?
I can show it.
Okay, thank you for the handout. Maria Risto. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Dorney, you have a question. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. So, Ms. Dorner, you said something about 71 on our PCI. Is that where we would be, or are we below that, or in your opinion, what is it?
Okay. First off, the QES report is showing all of the PCI numbers per street based on August of 15. So it has not been updated for the work that we've done on the PCC streets. The numbers that are in there for PCC are totally wrong. So either take them totally out, which gives us a little bit of a bump because they're so low of a PCI, or put them in at 100 because we have the funding already ready for that. That actually ratchets up the network PCI. In addition, the 2.2 that we allocated, of which 600 is left over, that money was used on streets with very low PCIs as well, and those have not been updated. So the QES report is not reflecting about 1.5 or 1.6 million that was just invested last year. And so if those get done, it could even be higher. So what I would suggest is that StreetSaver be updated to consider the PCIs of the PCCs at 100, so we can confirm what that does for this, and then update all of the streets that were done in 2016 and see where we are then, without changing anything else. Now, StreetSaver will automatically ratchet the other streets down a little bit because time has gone on, but we spent the money on very low-rated PCIs, and I have a feeling it's going to give us a big jack.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Dorner, so I'm having trouble connecting your presentation to this agenda item. Can you help me? How do I use this making decisions on this agenda item?
Well, first off, road maintenance is one of the first things that we're going to be getting from Measure B. The $650,000 is what is estimated for the first year. That $650,000 must be used on road maintenance, and if we have a PCI above 70, then we can use that in addition to road maintenance. We can use that money on other street and capital improvements having to do with our network, so our street network. So that's why I brought it up. In addition, at last Tuesday's meeting with the priority setting, there was a lot of numbers thrown around. No one mentioned the $650,000 that's still sitting already funded that was not used last year. They wanted to get an additional $2.8 million, which was based on the QES report, okay, for trying to get the PCI up. However, the detail for that shows that they're only adjusting streets that are in the upper 80s and 90s. It doesn't even show the low PCIs that we already did, or that would give us the biggest bang for the buck. It just came directly off the software. So there were a lot of numbers thrown out. I think there was another 600 or 800,000 that someone wanted for road maintenance as well to try to get our PCI up. So I thought it was important to go back and reflect on the validity or invalidity of the QES report and get it updated for at least those two primary factors. And I'd be happy to share all my computations with anyone should they care to go through it all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Dorner. Our next speaker is Maria Risto.
Hi, Maria Risto, 85 Broadway. I do sit on a town commission and I work with Safe Routes to School, but I'm speaking as a resident. First of all, these 13 items on here, if we can fund these, I mean, we've passed a half-cent sales tax. As someone who shops downtown all the time, I'm hoping that the extra money I'm paying is going to go to projects that benefit Los Gatos. So I don't want to go through all of these. I think they all have merit and will have a big impact on the town. But the one item, the school busing, can have, if we can do this study, it can have such an immediate impact on congestion that affects our town 5 days a week, twice a day, 9 months a year. And the way I frame this whole thing about the busing is this isn't a way to get kids to school. Our kids get to school. We don't have a problem with that. It's a way to get cars off the road. And right off the bat with the school traffic around school study, if you looked at it, it has kind of heat maps or locations of where students live. If you just put buses on Route 17, if you took Highway 17, you could take a couple hundred kids off the road. If you looked at Kennedy and Shannon, I believe there's 94 students just at Guadalupe Mines. There's possibly 150 along Kennedy and Shannon. So as we do this first study, we can look at just a couple of routes where we'd have a huge impact and then build the program from there. In terms of success, Danville's been wildly successful. I believe they've reduced their traffic by 33% over 8 years. And so we have a model that we know works, and we can learn from it and borrow from it. We also, if anybody remembers, 10 years ago, Dave's Avenue School was under construction, and they had Dave's Away. And for a year and a half, students were bused to a school in San Jose. I've spoken with the 3 women who worked on setting up those routes, dealing with the families, and figuring out how to make it work. And they're willing to share their knowledge and help out on this if we need it. But let's just say that as proof of concept, we know that Los Gatos parents will put their kids on a school bus, some of them will, on a school bus, and we can get cars off the road. And I think this is just a really, really important project, and I hope we can do what we need to do up front to get it going. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Risto. Natalie Ladd? Oh, I'm sorry. This was for number 12. Well, hold that thought. Okay, no other cards, so I'm closing public testimony. I look to council for further questions of staff and or comments. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Could we put the priority list back up, please? So I definitely agree with the first 3. I'm really struggling with number 4 being at number 4. I, have walked my dog down there to the sneak dirt path that gets to the trail on Route 9, and I have to run across entrances or exits to the highway 4 times to do it. I'm struggling with, without rebuilding that intersection, why we really want to encourage at least number 4 on our list of 13, encourage people to go on and off the trail at Route 9. Can you give a little more why this is important to staff?
So there's a couple of reasons why it's sort of floated to the top. The town has invested fairly heavily, the town and neighboring jurisdictions, fairly heavily in bike and ped improvements along Highway 9. They're not perfect, but there has been an investment there, and so this would continue that investment. I've also heard from some parents, and most recently at our Safe Routes, our caring adults, caring organizations, Safe Routes to School presentation that Superintendent Abadi hosted about kids not feeling comfortable using that entrance to the trail. But for instance, if somebody was going to the middle school from Almond Grove, if they had access to the trail at that location, would be more apt to use the trail for bike and ped access. So that's the feedback that we're getting, and that's why that item's floated to the top there.
Okay, thank you. I'm just having trouble imagining letting my kid ride down Route 9 to get on the trail.
Yep.
Councilmember Jensen?
Well, since the Vice Mayor was making comments on the list, I guess I will do that as well. I agree that the school busing is a huge priority, and bicycle and pedestrian improvements. I have consistently not wanted to spend money on a roundabout at Wood Road, and I remain consistent in that. And because I believe that improving the flow on the streets is better than closing the streets, I would move up the traffic signal system and the interchange. And I have then, I'm also curious about number 7, traveler information for local, which is digital signage. And I recall asking you last week, why can't we use the sign on Highway 17? And Mr. Morley, your answer was, well, we hesitate to put the information on there because we're afraid that people will find out that it's better. And so we don't want to put that information up. So why is number 7 now a priority?
So the freeway signage is Caltrans signage, and we're a little bit more limited on what we can do there. The street signage that we're talking about in terms of number 7 would be on local streets. And if you think about the signage that we do, for instance, when we close Wood Road, we do advanced warning signage to say that the road's closed ahead. To get to 17, you want to turn left on Highway 9, and so it would be those types of signage aspects, elements that we would use the signs for. We also use them for other occasions, such as the Christmas parade when we're providing advance notice there. and that kind of a thing.
Okay, so these are the two-wheel trucks, I'm going to call them, with the digital sign on the back?
So this would create permanent signage as opposed to using the portable ones, something a little bit more elegant, I guess, if you can get that to elegant with a digital sign.
But it's not going to give me that information until I get into Los Gatos. So if I'm on 17, it's backed up, and I look at my traffic app, and it tells me to go to 17 or go through town, I'm not going to get the information about the travel time in town until I get to town.
That's correct. You'd get it at locations in town.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Spector.
Thank you. I'm going to follow the Vice Mayor and Ms. Jensen, who started talking about things on the list that they liked or had questions about. I'm going to start with school busing, Danville model, whatever. It's always been a priority ever since we started working over the summer. The roundabout at Wood Road. The other one, it's not quite clear to me what staff means, but a local shuttle. And that to me, if we had a local shuttle, whether it's a flex type process model or something else, that could also address a senior transportation or senior shuttle. So I've sort of put those two together. I still think it would be very helpful to have the park and ride on Winchester, although after listening to Mr. Morley answer my questions and then answer Ms. Jensen's questions, I'm not sure which one is which, but a park and ride on Winchester. Bicycle and pedestrians, yes, ongoing priority, and then an upgrade to the traffic system. So of those, as I'm with the information I have right now, those would be my priorities.
Thank you. Any other comments? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll just sort of re-summarize where I was because I didn't really talk about them all. So I'm really not in favor with number 4 being where it is. I would keep number 1. I agree the school busing should be way at the top. Whether 2 is above 3, I'm not sure, but 2 and 3 next. And then I think 5 and 6 also, and then maybe drop 4 below 6. After that, I think we're getting far enough down the list that the local shuttle could be important. I'm just wondering how we're going to do it so that people ride it, because we have had buses around town that still didn't get much use. Maybe if we make it a fun trolley or something, or try to target lunch crowds bringing people into downtown, I don't know what, but just a shuttle that's kind of on a VTA kind of schedule, I'm skeptical that that's going to be a good use of money, so I'd like to hopefully be more creative with it. I think I'll just stop there.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'll go ahead and weigh in. I'm comfortable with the list, with the priority list, with the caveat that I understand that as conditions change, this will be fluid. And I say that just because having conversations, I know many of us have had conversations with our counterparts in other cities, there's always opportunities for funding from other sources. For example, we can ask Caltrans, we can ask we can weigh in on the state budget, although that's unrealistic. But what I'd like is having it all there, acknowledging these are all important and can somehow help congestion relief, and so that if there's opportunities to get funding from other sources that aren't necessarily from Measure B, we know that there's an avenue to do that, and we have someone that can actually pay attention to those various sources. So for me, hiring someone immediately is key. And then the next priority for me absolutely is the school busing study. I think there's been enough conversations with our counterparts in town through Safe Routes to School as well as our school districts, and I think we've had a successful model from Hillbrook that show that if you put the mechanism in place, it will be successful. And I'd really like to just use this opportunity to show that it is a project that can be successful. And I'd like to get funds immediately into that process. Also knowing that other cities are actively working so that they are shovel ready, I'd rather us focus on the top 1 or 2 and get those shovel ready, understanding that the remaining priorities are areas that a staff person and the rest of the PPW staff will continue working on as they see avenues for funding.
Thank you, Mayor. I had forgot about the position, so I guess I'm in agreement also. It does sound a little bit expensive. I assume it's fully loaded. It's salary plus everything, plus lights, plus office, so forth. Does sound a little bit expensive, but I think we could leverage millions of dollars with this position, and get us going. Otherwise, we may lose out to the bigger cities that have plenty of staff to get their project shovel ready. I've seen the bike and ped lists that VTA is funding, and we don't have much on those. They're all going to the bigger cities that are getting their projects there. So I think it's a dream if we don't add this position. So I'm supporting of that also.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. Just for staff, say we move forward and hire the position, it doesn't guarantee that we will get anything at all. Is that correct?
That's correct. Other than the formulaic 650.
All right. Well, so if we are going to receive 650 and you subtract 210, you're receiving 440. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would have a tough time justifying all of that position cost of that one. I think it's fairly safe to say that there'll be other projects that come to the town. What they are specifically, I think, depends on the amount of work and how we get in front of them. And that's sort of the reasoning behind putting it out there. It is an aggressive solution to fund this position, but I think it puts us in the best position for ongoing funding for the next 30 years of the measure.
Would you view this position as somebody who would chase grants for the town?
I think this position does a lot of things. It really digs in on some of our congestion solutions, definitely chases grants related to these programs to meet that match requirement, and then some. It fully engages with the Measure B efforts and moves those forward. I think it provides a different dimension. I did, when I was sort of sourcing the position and trying to decide what would be the appropriate position, did look at comparative jurisdictions. Mountain View and Palo Alto both have positions that pay slightly more than this. They're a little bit different in their compensation packages, but slightly more than this from the base pay perspective. That have a transportation manager, a person that does exactly this kind of work. So I felt like this was the right position in order for us to be competitive in the employment marketplace and get somebody who can really move the needle and bring some dollars to town.
One more. As of this point in time, there's no particular individual who has been identified. We're going to send out a rec, if so it be approved this evening, and try to just find somebody out there. Is that correct?
So the process would be we don't have a position within the town that is defined as a transportation. What I'm looking at is a transportation and mobility manager. So we would create that class specification. I have a draft one now that I'll work with HR on, and we'd bring that back to council for approval, probably as a consent item very shortly. And then move forward with the recruitment right after that. So that would be the goal. There is no candidate that's been identified. It would be an open recruitment that would be publicized as is typical for our recruitments.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Spector.
Just quickly, I wanted to add, and my brain's a little fuzzy because it's probably been a year since I read the traffics model, but we keep referring to number one, the school busing, which is really the Danville traffics model. I wanted to add that Danville, when they got the funding for their traffics, also added, I think it was either 1.5 or 2 engineers that are effectively doing what you're doing. So you're, by adding this position, doing pretty much the Danville model. And maybe you can remember better than I can, but I know part of their job was to implement the busing, but also go out and continually analyze how to improve congestion in town, and that's kind of what this position is for.
I think that's it exactly. It's there's a significant amount of work with establishing a program and running a program, and getting it off the ground, and even no matter what that looks like in the future. And Danville's is a JPA model. No matter what that looks like in the future, there'll always be a connection for the town to that model. So whether we have a representative staffing the JPA as Danville does, and multiple other cities within the Contra Costa County model, or some other model that develops out of the feasibility study, there's going to be a need for the town to be connected to make sure that the town's interests are met.
Councilwoman Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was of concern to me when I saw the suggestion of a staff person, $70,000 per year plus benefits for 2.5, 3 years. However, I'm supportive of the position based in part on staff's recommendation and the basis for that recommendation. And also, I am concerned that without such a position, we would prejudice our potential of obtaining funding under Measure B. And that's a risk I'm not willing to take.
Councilwoman Jensen?
This process question for staff. We have 3 items that are recommendations on our staff report. And I'm wondering whether, number 3, prioritize town's potential Measure B projects, if you are wanting a motion that puts them in order, or if the discussion that we've had tonight is sufficient.
The discussion that we had, I think, is sufficient given that there weren't any super drastic changes. I'll point out that, and I think one of the council members made the point that these aren't, if there's opportunities to move one forward that's lower on the list because there's a funding opportunity or something that comes forward, we would certainly make that a new priority and move it along. So it's not that we would work on them in order. We'll work on them as a group, but the top ones will receive our initial priority. And I hear loud and clear that the school busing is a big priority for the town. So I would push that one forward aggressively. I think we've got bike and ped improvements that have been we've begun to outline through our safe routes study and our bike and ped master plan that you'll see shortly. So those are good items for us to include as well as we're pushing forward. The other items we'll continue to have discussions on through other elements of council meetings, and you'll be able to help with the continued priorities there. So I think the information you've provided tonight is significant. I will throw out there is an opportunity potentially to throw other high-profile projects on the list. So if there's other interests that you have either now or in the future, we want to make sure and capture those. We know that it's a long-term program, so there's opportunities to adjust the list as we go. I would anticipate staff will do report outs on how we're doing on a fairly regular basis, so you'll see that as well. But there is an opportunity to maneuver this and massage it, drop projects off or add projects to it over time.
And if I could add one thing to that, several questions that I've heard from several residents who have voted for Measure B is they voted it with the understanding there would be a benefit to Los Gatos, and they're constantly asking, well, what's going on? And I would hope that whoever we hire, that would be a mechanism to provide that information, because a lot of people want to make sure that their sales tax dollars that they voted for are actually coming back into the town.
Thank you. That's a good point. I think we've done a lot in getting our public outreach out there. We have our Almond Grove website as an example of that. We would continue those efforts with everything that we work on.
Okay, and then I saw Councilmember Jensen and Councilmember Leonardis.
I was going to propose a motion, but I suspect Councilmember Leonardis either has a question or a comment, so I'll hold my motion until he does that.
Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. There has been some interest that I've heard from the community about Masol and Highway 9 intersection, and I would like to add that to the list.
So we can certainly add it as a separate list. It is included in our bicycle and pedestrian master plan as an item, and also referenced, I think, in our Safe Routes to School plan. So it'll be covered in multiple locations, but I'll capture that here. It's something that we're looking at and working on actively.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Jensen.
So if I may, I'd like to propose a motion, which would be that we receive the report of Measure B activities. Thank you very much. We have. Authorize $70,000 from fiscal year 2015-16 to fund a position for senior civil engineer, and I heard Mr. Morley call it a transportation and something, mobility.
Thank you.
Which I thought was better because it seems more inclusive and could morph into something that was not Measure B related, but that's not part of the motion. And that we prioritize the town's potential Measure B projects as per the discussion that you've had from council tonight with respect to their various issues and priorities.
Thank you. We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second from Vice Mayor. Any other comments? Councilmember Leonardis.
I will be supporting the motion with great expectations. I hope this individual can get $4 million a year out of the Measure B funds for us.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. And I would hope that all of us will be supporting this person to get our $4 million. Okay, item number 12, direction, next steps for the Parking and Infrastructure Ad Hoc Committee.
We don't have a formal presentation. Really, this is an opportunity for the council to provide additional direction for the ad hoc committee based on the priorities that were discussed this evening as well as last week at priority setting. And there are some options for your consideration with respect to the role for this committee. Staff is available for any questions.
Okay. Council members, any questions? If not, I have one card from Natalie Ladd.
Good evening. I'm Natalie Ladd, Chair of the Transportation Parking Commission, but I'm speaking on my behalf. I don't know if this is appropriate to bring this up right now, but I wanted to take the opportunity to share it with you guys. When I started on the Transportation and Parking Commission 3 years ago, the parking garage was kind of like my thing that I ran with, and I worked with Ed Stahl on that. And during that research, I found out some information that I wanted to share with you guys. You might already know, but a long time ago when the parking garages were built behind University, there was actually a tunnel that was built underground connecting the two garages together. I think that's a neat opportunity to perhaps share that information with whoever's going to build the current parking garage. Maybe there's a way of funneling these people underground to go from one parking garage to another, so that could take traffic off the streets. The other part that I wanted to bring up is I've spoken to many business owners, and on average, a lot of them say they get a couple tickets a month parking on the street, which equals to about $100 a month. And I see a great opportunity, whether it's a parking garage or it's something else, we can use, maybe come up with a program where there's a parking area somewhere remote, and these employees can either get a permit or take the VTA bus there or some kind of a shuttle. Again, taking people, business owners off of the street so the community can park and go shop. From my understanding, I don't remember the exact numbers, but Monica came, one of the staff members, to our meeting once, and the numbers were something like there was 1,000 business owners and there was 600 business owners and 1,000 parking spaces. Like 2/3 of the parking spaces are pretty much allocated to business owners. So I see a huge opportunity there across, instead of the parking garage, perhaps using these two opportunities to create more parking spaces. So I just wanted to share that information with you guys in case you can use that moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, any other comments? I'll close public testimony and I'll bring this back to the council. Just one of the items, at least I was thinking of as I worked with Manager Provetti in putting this forward, is the idea that we set our priorities as we did last week, and from that, all of the commissions and the boards and committees, including the council committees, would then create the work plans based on those priorities. Last Tuesday, I definitely heard parking garage and alternative parking strategies was something that I heard as a priority from those that came forward to testify. I'd like to hear from other council members what other priorities they think should be focused on for this ad hoc committee. And I'd also love to hear from staff what immediate steps are necessary to what's happening with the parking garage itself and that concept.
On the parking garage specifically, we have hired a consultant to provide oversight on the deal terms with our potential developer and are working through, the developers working through the draft of deal terms at this point. So we'll be shooting those back and forth at the staff level, trying to come to something that works, and that'll take a little bit of time, and we'll bring that ultimately back to the council for review to see that we're on the right track and moving forward.
Any questions on that? Okay, Councilmember Jensen and then Councilmember Leonardis.
Okay, this is not a question, and I suspect my comments will be somewhat unpopular, but I'm going to do it anyway. Thank you very much, Parking and Infrastructure Ad Hoc Committee, which was created when I was mayor to look into the parking garage, and they've done a very, very excellent job at doing that. We've got someone we're negotiating with on board. We've got a consultant. We are moving. Ad hoc committees are formed for a specific purpose. Their purpose has been accomplished. One of the things that we were talking about last week was how are we going to divide staff time for our new expanded finance committee, our age-friendly communities, our other priorities that we want to get done that we have to allocate staff time. We have a standing transportation and parking commission. We have a bicycle and pedestrian commission. We have a standing council policy committee, all of which are tasked with doing parking and infrastructure. I don't want to engage in essentially figuring out how to sustain a committee that has done a very good job at what it was supposed to do. So if we are talking about, for example, not spending $18,000 on a kind of energy, why would we keep a committee that is being duplicated in other places? That is not to discount by any stretch the hard work that this committee has done, but it's done. So my opinion is one of the alternatives is that we disband it and allow our commissions that are tasked with this to go ahead and do it.
Thank you. Councilmember Leonardis, and then I'll go to Vice Mayor.
I was just going to comment on something that was mentioned in the last meeting. We talked about possibly putting lifts in the existing garages, and Councilmember Spector, who was on the committee, said that they discussed that with the construction of the new garage, and they found it to be costly, although costly could be interpreted in a lot of ways. And I was just wondering if that could be something that could be further explored moving forward, along with the item that was brought forth by Mr. Silva at the last meeting, paying for an employee parking permit program.
The topic of the lifts will continue to be part of the conversation on the garage. They're a good concept for making good use of valuable space and real estate, and may help in keeping control of some of the elements of the project, such as height, that with the number of spaces may be a bit of a challenge for us. But that will develop over time based on the cost analysis and the pro forma in the project and what makes sense there. There also is an element of a learning curve for the users, so they work well for a private parking garage, so maybe for the residential spaces, but not necessarily for the public. So there's some consideration on that side. In terms of the other item, it would, I think, become identified as a staff priority and worked into the work plan along with the other items.
Okay. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd say Councilmember Jensen's comments weren't that bad. I think it's, it is somewhat questionable whether we should continue it or not, but I did want to make a counterpoint to it. What I think we still need is to look in, and it's in the staff report, look at the time limits on parking. I've heard lots of comments about the length of time limits and where they should be. Is there better ways to deal with employee parking, and should we have paid parkings in some places or all the places? And these are things that we keep getting talked about. I know the chamber told us a couple months ago they were going to have some meetings where they were going to collect some information on it, and it's not. With all the talks, it's not been able to be executed any changes. So I think it's going to need council horsepower and an ad hoc committee to actually get some change done if some change needs to be done. The Parking and Transportation have talked about it before, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So that would be my counter possibility to Councilmember Jensen's comments.
Okay, and then Councilmember Spector, and then Councilmember Jensen, and then I'm going to call myself.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I speak to this item, I feel like, it's sort of uncomfortable advocating for oneself, but then so be it. I think that the ad hoc committee has been very important. I believe mainly for two reasons. One, the existence of the ad hoc committee and Mr. Rennie's and my insistence that we keep having meetings moves the process along. So I think that's a good thing. I believe issues like interviewing potential developers of the garage and the terms of their agreements, I think that is, as Mr. Rennie said, are issues that deserve council power. There are times that we've discussed within our ad hoc committee the potential overlap between the issues that we address and the issues that are addressed by the Transportation and Parking Committee, but they tend to do more general issues, whereas the ad hoc committee gets down to what I would consider decision-making issues that they make recommendations up to the town council. And based on last week's meeting, obviously the garage kept coming up over and over and over again. And the other thing that parking kept coming up, yes, but specifically parking for employees and whether or not there should be some special accommodation. I believe, again, that is an issue that is best addressed at a council-level committee.
Councilmember Jensen?
The Policy Committee brought forward already the discussion of employee parking permits. It's in process at the Policy Committee. It was brought forward by, actually, to me, by a restaurant owner downtown. Then I discussed it with the Chamber of Commerce. We are currently discussing it Policy Committee. I would hate to see two council committees work at cross purposes, but if one wants to do that and the other is going to be not doing that, so be it, but we should not be duplicating efforts.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment and then ask staff for some feedback. What I'm looking to do, it's parking, yes, is a priority, and I don't want to diminish the importance of the ad hoc committee nor any of our currently existing committees. What I'd like to do is how do we better utilize our resources? I think what we've heard from the past week is that we have a lot of needs with limited resources, and how do we use those resources to meet them? And so a couple thoughts that I've had is, yes, there are several items should the garage continue moving forward that I think that this ad hoc committee should continue to address. But what I wanted to ask specifically of Director Morley is, has the parking transportation or transportation has the commission created their work plan so that as an advisory body, if we said this is an item we would like for you to work on and with a specific deadline, is that something that we have the purview to do?
The commission is currently working on their work plan, so they wanted to hear the priorities from the 31st. They provided input into that on what they thought were highlights for the commission. And they are actively, with our next meeting, we will outline our priorities and hopefully adopt them for the next 12 months. So that's something that's on the go now. In terms of council input, they would, I think, speaking for all of them, love the input and the direction of the council in terms of where the council would like them working. The making that connection, I think, and having that input is very valuable for the commission. The difference between the work that a committee, I think, and a commission does has to do with the involvement of staff. So the commissions are set up for the commissioners to provide a good deal of the legwork and the work behind it, and in the ad hoc committees, it's largely a staff effort to move it forward. So a little bit of a difference there. ultimately with the commissions, as we advance a thought and as the commissioners do the good work that they do to help us move those along, the staff will be involved in helping to craft that into something that works from a government perspective.
Okay, and so following on that, what I'd like to do is better utilize our commissions. And I've heard from various commissioners that not only just transportation and parking, but on the others, parks, you name it, that as an advisory group, they would like to actually provide more advisory policy recommendations. And this is an opportunity, in my mind, for them to continue working on a strategic priority that we've identified. And so, understanding the various resources at play, I would be of the mindset that let's let transportation and parking take this with a very finite objective and deadline and provide that back to the full council so that decisions can actually be made. Vice Mayor?
I guess our protocol isn't to ask questions, but I'll say I'm not sure when you said this. Are you referring to the items in the staff report that I mentioned about timing and employees and paid parking possibly?
Yes.
So I would continue or add some comments to it. So I'm also would like to see commissions pick it up. So and I had said those are items that I would have wanted to work on the ad hoc committee. I'm willing to turn it over to the commission to try to work on. If we're not getting anywhere in 9 months or a year, I might say let's bring it back to a council ad hoc committee to get it moving forward. But I'm certainly willing to let commission try their hand at it.
Any other comments? Councilmember Leonardis?
So is it possible just to have the ad hoc committee be silent but still exist, not be necessarily active, try to allocate the work to the Transportation and Parking Committee, not necessarily disband it, but keep it available for the future if needed?
That is an option, and what we would recommend to the council is that if at the time that it seems appropriate to re-engage the committee, that the council be very clear about its new scope and duration, and that we memorialize that in a resolution so that it's clear what then when we do reconstitute it or re-engage it, it's very clear what their work plan is.
Councilmember Leonardis?
And as a follow-up, being that they were the ones who worked on getting the parking garage and moving forward, perhaps when that process does come forward, they could be involved then working with staff and the community and whoever else, the developer as well, being part of that concept moving forward.
I think that's a great idea. We'll continue to keep them engaged there.
Thank you.
So then one question I have, I'll pose it to the council, is should we refine it so that it's very clear that this committee is in existence for the garage, so that instead of reconstituting a new one with a resolution that we have our committee, our ad hoc committee, that when there is action necessary, they would be called on?
That would be staff's preference, and working with the town attorney, we can bring back a resolution for your consideration on February 21st. That would essentially memorialize the scope to continue to support our work on the proposed parking garage and look at how we can use and leverage the ad hoc committee on community engagement as that process moves forward.
And one last question. I know over the course of past maybe 3 months, once in a while we'll get letters trickling in about this virtual garage. Right now, who is the depositor? Who do those go to?
They should come to me, and I'll keep them in, and they'll go on my list of folks to engage with as we get to that very very preliminary stage of conceptual design. So okay. We're committed to the public outreach. We think it's essential.
Okay, Thank you.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
may just plug the good work that Parks and Public Works has done to create a dedicated webpage on the proposed parking garage. So there's a landing place for all members of the public to find the information on the proposal. And as the development proceeds, we'll also have links back to the CDD website, community development. So if and when an application is on file, we'll have still a common place for everyone to go so they can continue to track and participate.
Okay, any other questions of staff or comments? So is there, do you need a specific motion from us, given the conversation?
I think if you'd like to make an assignment to the Transportation and Parking Commission, it'd be nice to have some structure or some consensus and some structure around what that might look like, what the outcome might be from the council's perspective at the point in which they'd like to see it. The council would like to see it back here. And if you, I heard 3 items from Councilmember Rennie, sort of the timing, the time limits on parking. Employee parking and paid parking are those the 3 that resonate with the council as a whole.
And we would work to make sure there's not a duplication of effort with the policy committee, since that is something that's already in the work plan. So we may have to finesse the employee-employer parking a little bit with TNP.
Okay. Okay, well, any comments on that? Okay, well then, and do you need a motion on that? I see our chair and our vice chair.
Yeah, I think the suggestion is we bring it back on the 21st as a recommendation that you can provide a motion on, so that we'll have some wording for you.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other comments? Okay, very good. So now, actually, that's the end of our meeting. So we are now adjourned. Thank you very much.